Let's dive straight into today's explainer and tackle the absolute biggest mystery of the summer. Why on earth is a 40 degrees Celsius heat wave in Europe triggering massive continent-wide health emergencies, while over in India we comfortably, or at least functionally, handle 45 degrees without the entire system collapsing? I mean, it sounds completely counterintuitive, doesn't it? Well, before we unravel this really fascinating environmental riddle with today's cinematic visuals, if you enjoy these deep dives and want to keep learning with us, definitely make sure to hit that subscribe button right now.
So it's completely natural to be a little skeptical when you first hear the news. We are so used to seeing bustling, completely normal streets in India at 45 degrees, and yet in Europe, hitting 40 is causing total, absolute chaos. But the main thing you need to take away from this explainer is that a temperature reading on a thermometer, it really doesn't tell the whole story. Today, we're going to do a full scientific investigation into the environmental, architectural, and infrastructural realities causing what we're calling this thermal paradox. All right, Section 1, the stinging sun and those incredibly long days.
To really get this, we first have to look at how crystal clear skies dramatically change the physical impact of the sun itself. See, it's not just about the heat in the air. It's about what is, or rather, what isn't, sitting right between you and the sun. An air quality index, or AQI, hovering around a pristine 20 to 30 is pretty standard for a lot of Europe. In India, we're actually super accustomed to this thick layer of dust and pollution that, okay, while it's terrible for our lungs, inadvertently acts as a giant natural UV filter. But in Europe, the sky is crystal clear. That means there is absolutely zero UV filtration. The result is this direct, stinging sunlight. It is so intensely blinding that just stepping outside with a cap and sunglasses is practically impossible. The sun out there doesn't just warm you, it literally pierces you.
And it pierces for a very, very long time. 16. That is the magic, or maybe tragic, number Europe experiences during peak summer months like July and August. The sun comes up around 5 a.m. and doesn't even set until 10 p.m. Just think about the physics of that for a second. That is 16 relentless hours where the ground, the buildings, and the air are just continuously absorbing thermal radiation without a single break. In India, our shorter daylight hours actually give the environment a chance to cool off at night. But Europe, it barely gets a breather.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, heat-trapping European homes.
Okay, so European architecture actually turns this intense 16-hour sunlight into an inescapable trap. Historically, their insulation systems have been the absolute pride of European building. For centuries, right? The biggest threat to life over there was freezing winters. So, homes were engineered to basically act like giant, heavy thermoses. Thick walls, incredibly tight seals, they were designed to trap every single ounce of internal heat. The cruel irony today is that these exact engineering marvels are now baking their residents alive. They soak in the heat from those long summer days and absolutely refuse to let it go.
The contrast here is just stark. Traditional Indian homes are famously designed for cross-ventilation. We've got high ceilings, open courtyards, layouts specifically meant to let hot air naturally escape. European homes, on the other hand, actively lock it in. Once the heat penetrates an insulated European house, it has nowhere to go. Imagine zipping up a heavy winter parka in the middle of a hot desert. That is essentially what these buildings are doing to the people trapped inside them.
So, moving on to Section 3, the massive lack of ACs and fans.
Now, you might be wondering, if your house is basically a giant oven, why not just go out and buy an air conditioner? It seems like the most obvious fix in the world, but it's really not that simple. First off, historically, ACs were entirely unnecessary. I mean, why buy an expensive cooling unit when you only even see the sun a few months out of the year? But even now, as temperatures are literally soaring, there are massive administrative roadblocks. Europe is highly regulated. If you're a tenant, you can't just drill a hole in your wall. You need permission from super strict local authorities and landlords who, quite frankly, frequently say no. Plus, these beautiful, centuries-old historic buildings simply lack the structural compatibility and ductwork for modern cooling systems.
To really understand the desperate, on-the-ground reality of this, listen to Indian journalist Pooja Shukla, who is currently living in Germany. She points out that even basic portable fans are completely selling out. Imagine that. People are scrambling everywhere to buy simple portable fans, which are now costing a crazy 130 to 180 euros, and they still can't find them anywhere. This is a massive supply chain failure, simply because the infrastructure was never prepared for an entire continent to suddenly demand cooling equipment all at once.
And that leads us to Section 4,
troubled systems and melting roads.
See, this problem extends way, way beyond the home. It actually causes underlying biological coping systems to buckle. Living in a high-temperature zone means Indian physiology is totally habituated to sweating and regulating heat, plus our demographic naturally skews a bit younger. European physiology, however, is adapted to historically cold climates. Furthermore, Europe has a very high elderly population. When you take a body adapted to the cold, especially an older, much more vulnerable body, and you put it into unprecedented, sustained heat without any way to cool down, that is exactly why we're seeing these tragic health emergencies and spikes in mortality all over the news.
And it's not just biology. The physical world around them is failing just as badly. The railway systems, which are normally a huge point of pride in Europe, are facing massive, cascading delays. The tracks can actually warp under extreme temperatures, which forces trains to run super slowly or just stop entirely, leading to these sweltering, horribly overcrowded stations. Even more shockingly, there are widespread reports from places like Leipzig, Germany, of the road tarmac literally melting. The tar gets so incredibly hot it just sticks right to the tires of passing cars. The very foundation of these cities was poured for a climate that, honestly, no longer exists.
All right, final section, what is the way forward?
Faced with homes that literally trap heat, basically zero ACs, and melting infrastructure all around them, how are everyday people actually coping? Well, necessity breeds invention, and here are some of their immediate survival tactics. First, schools are actively altering their schedules, dismissing kids super early just because the classrooms are too hot to function in. Second, Europeans are flocking to nature. In Germany alone, there are over 12,000 natural, permitted swimming lakes, and right now they are absolutely packed with people just trying to cool off. And finally, in a truly wild image, city police in places like Munich and Berlin are actually deploying public water cannons. Yeah, the heavy-duty ones normally used for riot control, to spray down citizens and cool off the sweltering city streets. But water cannons and lake days, those are just temporary band-aids. As extreme heat transitions from this rare anomaly into the new everyday normal, we really have to ask the big question. Will European cities need to completely gut and rebuild their beautiful, historic infrastructure entirely from scratch? Seriously, how long can a modern society survive in buildings and cities designed for a climate of the past? It's a massive, monumental challenge that is undoubtedly going to define the next century of global climate adaptation. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.